We had a basketball game last night in Starkville. It was funny because the first half of that game last night felt like a continuation of the second half of the previous game. And then the second half of last night's game felt like the possibility that John Sundvold raised yesterday when he coined it a rock fight. It felt very much like a rock fight in the second half, although Mississippi State had bigger rocks than Ole Miss did in said rock fight. Bigger rocks with more jagged and deadly edges, perhaps. Bulldogs win round two, 83-71. It's a 12-point win for Mississippi State, so not only do they win, but they cover in the game last night. Watching, hey, Dad, you were there, and so your perspective may be a little bit different. I thought the crowd in the first half was just kind of ho-hum. But it absolutely went to another level about midway through the second half when that technical foul was applied to Chris Beard on the sideline. And from then until the end, it felt like the atmosphere that I anticipated that we were going to have the whole time.
Yeah, the first few minutes of the first half when State was leading and it felt like they were in kind of control of the game. Mm-hmm. And the crowd was into it. And then Ole Miss makes that great run and gets the lead and takes it into the locker room. And there was definitely some, oh no, here we go again kind of feeling. But State came out second half, immediately tied the game up, immediately grabs the lead. And then, yeah, you're right from there. It was intense. And then when Beard gets the tee, it ratcheted up a notch. And then you have the moment where Keyshawn Murphy hits the three-pointer, and that was probably the biggest roar of the night. And from there, State was just in control.
It was a huge shot, and I mean the tallest shot of the night too. I mean he really arced that
it got up there.
It got way up there.
It was right up there with me. It was up there with me in the upper deck.
It's funny you say that because the three that stands out for me with about 6 minutes left to go in the game. Ole Miss had cut it to. Did they cut it to 4? I think they got it down to 4.
From a DJ Jeffries shot.
And when DJ Jeffries hit the three from the corner, I thought, that was a big one right there. For a guy that shoots 24% from behind the arc, no less. And he goes 2 for 3 last night.
Isn't that kind of the thing?
That was that. Well, Jeffries is a better shooter, I think. Yeah. And maybe it's one of those things where it's like, I'm still living off of him being a 5-star in high school. Mm-hmm. But he has some games where he shoots the ball well. It feels like he just never puts it together. But in this game, and, let's talk about DJ Jeffries coming back, didn't play much on Saturday, only 3 minutes. And watching him in warm-ups, I thought he was walking kind of gingerly, and I thought, okay, he may not be able to do much tonight. Instead, he was kind of the catalyst for Mississippi State in that second half when they went to that second unit with Cam and Hubbard in foul trouble and Tolu on the bench. And that was the unit kind of that extended the lead. There was a moment there where State has Hubbard, Matthews, and Tolu Smith all on the bench at around the 13.5-minute mark. And I think at that point, Jans is just thinking, let me get Tolu an extra minute or two of rest before we go to this 12-minute timeout. And instead, in that time, State is able to grab control of the game with Deshaun Davis, Shaq Moore, DJ Jeffries, Keyshawn Murphy, and Jimmy Bell out there. Mm-hmm. And that's when they were able to extend the lead. So I thought that was interesting that I don't think it was a planned thing by Jans. He just wanted to get his guys a little extra rest, but it turned into the moment where the game got away from Ole Miss.
And that was a 14-2 run?
Mm-hmm.
In just a moment, I'm going to give you credit, but first I'm going to take a swipe at you.
That's good.
It's a story as old as time itself, and you didn't recognize it. You didn't see it coming. You even posited yesterday that perhaps DJ Jeffries wouldn't even play. After going 3 minutes on Saturday and not being able to go the rest of the way, just don't know what kind of shape he's going to be, not even sure that DJ Jeffries is going to play tonight. Oh, but the young man from the state of Mississippi who has spent his career as a Bulldog in a rivalry game against Ole Miss, not only does he find the superhuman strength to play in the game, but he excels in the game. He etches his name into the history and the lore of the rivalry. Should have seen it coming, hey, Dad. You didn't even think he was going to play.
We'll give him the Anthony Boone Award for a miraculous recovery.
Perhaps. So that's my swipe at you, my tip of the cap. As we were talking about players who might have an impact that are not necessarily mainstream or are not the first guy that you would think of, you suggested yesterday that Keyshawn Murphy might be that guy. And he was. He was.
And Ole Miss didn't have that guy in this game. They didn't have that guy. You know, Murray and Flanagan and obviously Morrell, who may have swayed my Howell Trophy vote the way he played last night. They were all good for Ole Miss, but the rest of the team didn't show up as much, and that's why Ole Miss. You know, we go back to the game in Oxford. T.J. Caldwell's 18 points was the difference in that game. Ole Miss didn't have that guy this time.
11 bench points for Ole Miss. Mississippi State, what was it, 42?
49.
49. Some of that is skewed by the fact that Tolu didn't start, but still, take him away, and State still more than doubled up Ole Miss in bench points. They are really, the Rebels are lacking in scoring options that are not named Morrell, Murray, and Flanagan at the moment. And the latter two aren't being particularly efficient right now.
No. One thing you wanted to see, Borky, you got last night. There's 19 shot attempts for Matthew Morrell.
Yeah.
But you didn't have the same level of efficiency.
No, the second half, and we'll talk about it coming up after this, but whether you credit Mississippi State for this or blame Ole Miss for this, but second half offense was awful for Ole Miss. 1 of 9 from 3, 10 turnovers, only 8 made shots. 2 more turnovers than made shots in the second half for them.
Yeah, not a good second half for Ole Miss by any stretch of the imagination. Ole Miss only hit 1 3 in the second half, and it was in garbage time right at the end. State's defense in the second half was elite. You must have you either read my text after the game or my tweet after the game last night, or you had the exact same impression that I had, because that's what I tweeted after it was over. Just like a few random thoughts about the game. Mississippi State's defense, especially in the second half, was elite. Cam Matthews is a beast. Ole Miss had no answer for him. Tolu Smith, Ole Miss had no answer for.
It's funny when you think about Ole Miss had the lead in the half, and so you're like, all right, State made adjustments, and that's how they got the win. The adjustments were just to play better defense. That was the whole adjustment. Yeah. There wasn't anything technical in the game plan there. They just ratcheted up the effort.
We also have a message that says, please tell me everything is going to be fine with MSU baseball. We'll do that later in the show.
Will we do that?
Okay.
Well, we may
we'll answer his question later in the show.
Yeah.
We will get to baseball, but we want to spend most of this first hour on basketball. It was a big game. That was the other part of my tweet last night. That's a big win for Mississippi State. It was a tough loss for Ole Miss, and it makes Saturday for the Rebels in particular massive.
Yeah, the margin for error is razor thin for them. So we talked about it some yesterday when Haydad was dealing with the chaos in the studio there, but the what was on the line versus what you lose with the loss. So what do you gain with the win? What do you lose with the loss? And Mississippi State didn't, quote-unquote, gain a lot from a win when we're talking about tournament perspective. They didn't move up a whole lot, just winning a home game, but they are comfortably, at the moment, safely in the tournament, barring an epic collapse that's very unlikely to happen. They're going to make the NCAA tournament. Losing last night, though, would have not changed things that much, but it still would have been, okay, now you look at the rest of the schedule, and if they're not beating Ole Miss at home, are they beating Kentucky at home? And you start having that conversation. They took care of business last night, so that makes it all a moot point. They're going to make the NCAA tournament. For Ole Miss, they didn't move down much. They went from last 4 in to first 4 out. Luckily, as we always talk about, the bubble is really, really bad. Other teams on the bubble lose. Ole Miss lost, other teams are going to lose on the bubble. It's what the bubble teams do. You've got to get 68 in the field, and there's not 68 really good teams in college basketball. But the margin for error is razor thin, and they're not playing great basketball right now. And that's not taking away from for Mississippi State in the second half because they played good defense. They forced 10 turnovers. They were active. They were physical. All of those things are true. But that's another game where Ole Miss struggles to score the basketball. They can't score at the moment, and it looks like things bog down offensively at times. The ball sticks a little bit. And last night is just yet another example of the difference between teams with quality bigs and teams like Ole Miss. Mississippi State can rely on a guy like Tolu to get them buckets. Bell was good spelling Tolu as well last night.
He's 6'10", 280 pounds, and he's playing against 230-pound 7-footers.
He shouldn't be able to jump the way he can jump at that size.
He's like a Mack truck down there.
Unbelievable. But Mississippi State last night had a quality, skilled big man that can get you buckets. And so if Hubbard, for example, is not giving you anything from the outside, they still have that guy that you can send the ball to down low, make a post move, draw contact, make a bucket, and win games that way. Ole Miss does not have that guy, and there's nothing they can do about that, but they have no offensive presence on the block whatsoever. And so when they're missing shots, they're done. And you saw that last night.
And we didn't mention that either, by the way, and all that about State and the way they played. Hubbard only had 5 points.
Yeah.
Only made 1 3 last night. So they got this win with the guy who I would tell you is their best scorer, giving them hardly anything.
Yeah. I tell you what, though, every time the ball leaves his hand, I just assume it's going in. It looks so pure coming out of his hand. I mean, it just does.
There are shooters like that. He's one of them, yeah.
So, interesting, Borky, that you talk about the Ole Miss bigs and their lack of post presence, and I think that is very much a real thing. So, Moussa Cisse, I think he is skilled in the post. The move that he made to get past the double team with Tolu and whoever it was that was collapsing down on him, where he kind of gave him a ball fake and they went by and he goes up for a dunk and he had another dunk where he just exploded up and flushed it down last night. I thought that was two pretty good skilled moves in the post. But the difference that you saw last night between Moussa Cisse is they've got to get it to him early and moving with stuff happening around him. Whereas with both Tolu Smith and with I just drew a blank. The other big guy, Jimmy Bell. There were multiple times where Mississippi State got those guys in the ball in the post and cleared out to the other side of the floor and said, one-on-one, stop him. And he can't.
Nope.
That's the difference. Ole Miss can't feed the ball to Moussa Cisse and let him go to work one-on-one with another big man and expect him to win more times than not, whereas Mississippi State has two guys, and three if you want to count Keyshawn Murphy, that can do that. Now, I don't think of Keyshawn Murphy as a true five in the way that Tolu Smith and Jimmy Bell are, but he's big enough that if you need him to slide down to the five, he can. But he's very much more of like a stretch four.
And this sort of plays into the discussion of Chris Beard's comments after the game, where he discussed how Tolu Smith and Jimmy Bell weren't called for any fouls in this game. And it's as simple as Ole Miss didn't get the ball to their bigs down low. They took Cisse and Sharp took 4 shots total. You know, the guys who were guarding the guards who were taking all of the shots, Cam Matthews had 4 fouls. Josh Hubbard had 4 fouls. But Tolu, they didn't have any defensive work to do because Ole Miss isn't running any offense through its bigs.
And then think back to last game, too, because we'll talk about it. We got a text about it, I'm sure. Officiating and free throw discrepancy. Ole Miss in the first half against Missouri did not take a single free throw. They didn't take one game ago. And I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, Doug Shows wasn't officiating that game.
No, he was not.
There's a style of play component that leads to a free throw discrepancy when you look at the way Mississippi State played last night versus the way Ole Miss played last night. That contributes to a free throw discrepancy.
Yeah, I mean, Mississippi State is constructed differently. They are a physical basketball team. And one of the things that John Sunvold talked about during the broadcast last night was that, hey, this is stylistically in the second half more of a Mississippi State game than an Ole Miss. The first half and the first game, so the first 3 halves that were played in this series this year, stylistically were more along the lines of what Ole Miss wants to do and what Ole Miss needs to do to be able to win basketball games. Second half, though, Mississippi State, despite struggling at the free throw line, after Tolu Smith started 5 of 5, he missed his next 7 free throws. Now, he finished the night 8 of 15.
8 of 15, yeah.
And that was after starting 5 of 5. So he was 3 of 10 after a perfect 5 for 5 start from the free throw line. But Cam Matthews was pretty good at the line. Keyshawn Murphy was pretty decent at the line. Mississippi State, though, as a team, I mean, they shot their season average, right? 59% from the line. Actually, a little bit below it.
I'll just go ahead and let's go. I'm going to give you a glimpse into the future. Whenever Mississippi State's season ends in the NCAA tournament, it will be a game they lose by 6 or 7 where they miss 10 to 12 free throws.
I don't disagree with that. I think that is an altogether reasonable prediction. I mean, we're on the topic of officiating. Let's just there's some that are going to disagree with this. I did not think that the officiating last night was egregious, but it certainly was not exceptional. And here's the thing that I thought was the biggest problem with the way that game was. And you had 2 really veteran officials in Doug Shows and Pat Adams. I didn't think there was consistency in the way the game was called. They let a lot of contact go in the first half and in the early part of the second half, and then it got a little more ticky-tack. And then they kind of oscillated between those 2 extremes for the rest of the game. Chris Beard clearly wanted a technical when he got it. I'm still not sure exactly what Chris Jans did to get his technical called by the official who was under the basket, Pat Adams, feeding the ball to the guy shooting a free throw. And so he is, at best, 55 feet from where Chris Jans was. Maybe farther than that. I don't know. It was, especially in the second half, the game had very, very little flow. And part of that was because of the official. On the C Spire text line, 601-879-4395. C Spire, customer inspired. Was it me, or did Chris Beard remind anyone else of Tom Hanks from A League of Their Own with that under-the-breath comment to get the tech? You could tell he was doing it for team motivation. Even though it didn't work, it gave me a laugh.
100%.
He was
100%.
fed up, but he
Yeah,
was looking for a spark also.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. But it didn't work.
It's funny, after both texts, the opposite team went on a run. I mean,
yes.
Neither one.
I was up there looking around. I was like, State was up 11 when Jans got the tech. Now they're only up 4. I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I'm with you. When
that
they
makes me
showed,
believe that Jans's tech was not something he wanted to have happen, I don't think.
yeah, when they showed
I
the
think he
replay,
got caught saying something.
I tried to read lips, but also there was a point in the game where Jans was yelling at the officials and using some words, because that happens in sporting events. There's nothing wrong with it. It's what you do. It's what coaches do. But they showed the replay of when he got the tech, and I was trying to read his lips, and I thought, I didn't see any words that I know from that far away to warrant stopping play, essentially, to run over there to tee him up. I was really confused as to what led to that.
Well, I think you asked the right question there. What led to that? Had he been giving it to Pat Adams for an extended period of time and Pat had told him, that's enough, no more, and then he said something else and it was like, boom? I mean, altogether possible.
Yeah. Well,
I did think watching Chris Jans in the game last night, there were times where he was more deserving of a technical foul than the point at which he actually got the technical foul. Yeah. I also wondered, so Doug Shows popped the tee on Chris Beard, and Beard did not immediately stop, and Doug kind of did that quick shoulder turn, look back at him as like, you want some more? I got another one in my pocket if you want it. Just
don't you love how that's the people that run the game act? No, look, I'm two things can be true at once. And for some reason, people are just so incapable of understanding nuance that they'll go to their message boards anonymously and talk about innocent young women in disgusting ways. You absolute loser. It can be true that the way the game was officiated last night stunk, especially in the second half. And again, it's not coming from a this is why Ole Miss lost angle, because I remember there was a foul on Hubbard where when the whistle blew, Hubbard stopped and just looked at his coach and was like, "Coach, what?" And Jans looked back and was like, "I don't know." And I'm sitting in my living room and I tweeted, I was like, "Let them play. Good Lord." Like that at no point should have stopped play for a whistle. There were more foul calls than minutes played in the game. There were 60 free throws shot in the game. That's ugly. And that's a product of who was calling the game and not the way the game was played, in my opinion. Saying that does not mean I think that is why Ole Miss lost. Here's why Ole Miss lost, because Mississippi State played better than them.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I was just about to say, Ole Miss lost because they didn't make shots last night. You made that point yesterday. Ole Miss wants to win, they got to make shots.
And they didn't.
And they didn't make shots, but the reason, largely, they missed some open looks. But I thought Mississippi State, with the exception of about a 10-minute window in the first half, from about the 10-minute mark until halftime, I didn't think State was very good defensively. They seemed to lose their edge a little bit. But for the first 10 minutes of the game and the last 20 minutes of the game, the biggest reason that Ole Miss didn't make shots is because Mississippi State made life a living hell on them trying to make shots.
And what I really noticed in the second half, State wasn't picking up full court, but they would meet whoever was bringing the ball up for Ole Miss just after midcourt. And so Ole Miss couldn't get into their offensive sets because they were getting met so far from the basket, and they couldn't even dribble or pass out of it because State's defense was so suffocating so far from the basket. And that led to a lot of those 10 second half turnovers for Ole Miss because State just wouldn't even let them get into an offensive set, let alone give an open look to make a shot. I mean, it really made Ole Miss look like they were having a hard time just doing basic basketball things in the second half.
All right, don't look at the box score. Who won the rebounding battle last night?
I know the answer.
Yeah, it was 34 apiece. Who won the offensive rebounding battle last night?
If somebody won it, I don't know off the top of my head, but if somebody won it, they won it by like one.
It was 15-15.
Yeah.
I just now looked specifically at that line on the box score. I had no idea that Ole Miss had 15 offensive rebounds last night.
They were really getting some offensive, especially in the first half. They did a good job of getting second chance points. And what's funny is, the game in Oxford, State dominated the boards. I think they were plus 15 on the Rebels in that game. So, Ole Miss did a lot of things that should have had them in position to win this game. But as Borky says, shot making was not where it needed to be for them. And so they lost.
Yeah.
Why is it difficult for people to believe that those two things can be true at the same time? I was flabbergasted by some of that last night.
It's just easier to believe that the refs are against you. It's just easier. Yeah, I had people tweeting at me last night like, this game is so poorly officiated. I'm like, is this your first time watching college basketball?
Especially
this first ever game? It's every game. It's part of the ambiance. It's like when you go to Popeyes and the service isn't good. That's part of the experience. The food's delicious, but you got to wait. Same thing. You go to the basketball game, it's fun. It's a fun time, but the refs suck. Just the way it is. Also, I want to give a quick shout-out. You gave a shout-out to some idiots on the MSU message boards. Let me give one to the Ole Miss message boards.
Go for it.
Doug Shows, his dad didn't play basketball at Mississippi State. He was a Baptist preacher. Calm down.
I've always you guys were rough on Doug Shows this morning when we were talking. The thing is, I've thought that generally he's one of the better officials in college basketball.
I didn't like how it was called last night. Just too touchy in the second half.
He holds a soft spot in my heart. I saw him throw out Nolan Richardson at the hump one time, and I've liked him ever since.
Never been mad at him. Yeah.
No, it's a great day when that happens.
Yeah. So 83-71 was the final. A couple of shooting numbers. Ole Miss, 50% from the field in the first half of the game. They shot 29% in the second half. 50% from behind the three-point line in the first half. 11% in the second half. Really good night at the free throw line for the Rebels, 19 of 21. Mississippi State shot 50% in the first half, 50% in the second half. They didn't try to do too much with the three ball. 50% in the first half, 3 of 6, 3 of 8 in the second half. That's 43% for the game on only 14 three-point attempts. State was not good at the free throw line. And Haydad said a second ago, their season very well could end in the NCAA tournament in a game because they missed a dozen free throws. That's what they missed. No, they missed 16 of them last night. 23 of 39, 59%.
If they shoot 70% in this game, they win by 20.
Now, the flip side of that is State made 2 more free throws than Ole Miss attempted, despite shooting 59% at the line.
Yeah.
Ole Miss had no answer in the post. And it wasn't just with Tolu Smith or Jimmy Bell. It was other guys who made moves down low. And, Ole Miss is supposed to be double teaming, but for some reason the double team goes away. Ole Miss doesn't make a switch down low. Just gets blown by.
Shaq Moore had, 3 or 4 layups in this game? Deshaun Davis had a couple of layups. Both of his buckets were layups in this game. Matthews was able to get to the rim a few times. Yeah. That State's offense, it's inside out. And Ole Miss's offense is outside in.
Yeah. There's no question.
Yeah, it is pretty remarkable that you score 83 points when Josh Hubbard is virtually non-effective.
Yeah, that's the other side of that, yeah.
4 fouls.
He has his normal game. State's is pushing 100.
Only played 23 minutes. He was in foul trouble in both halves. 2 of 9 from the field, 1 of 6 from behind the arc. I mean, it's a very not Josh Hubbard game, and yet the Bulldogs were still able to win it, which I think gives you reason to be pleased, to be happy, to be excited if you're a Mississippi State fan. You can have a night where Josh Hubbard is frankly poor, and he has not had many of those nights, and you still find a way to win by double digits in a rivalry game, no less. So there's a lot of good there. I had one thought. If Mississippi State could somehow, and by the way, I go back to what football coaches say where you can't get your teams up for every single game. But if Mississippi State somehow had the ability to replicate the energy with which they played in that game last night, that is not a team you want to face. But it's hard to do that every single game. Hard to. All right, let's flip the page when we come back and look ahead. What's coming up? Mississippi State's defense. But their guards defending the ball had really, really active hands. Ole Miss turned it over 10 times. Or I'm sorry, State had 10 steals leading to 17 Ole Miss turnovers. And I'm guessing here, I would say 4 of those 10 steals, maybe 5 of those 10 steals were just guarding the ball one-on-one and reaching in and either taking it away or swatting it away. I thought that was big. I mean, ball 30 feet from the basket, and you just pick a point guard's hands clean or an off guard. Thought that was big last night, and just part of that overall suffocating defensive effort that Mississippi State gave last night. So what's next for the Bulldogs? They go to LSU this weekend, a resurgent LSU team, an LSU team that's getting better.
Suddenly feisty LSU team.
Back-to-back top 25 wins for LSU, winning on the road at South Carolina last Saturday, coming from behind, and winning at home last night against Kentucky. Trailed by 15 in the second half. LSU team can make shots. So, big test on Saturday on the road. Back home for Kentucky. Got to go to Auburn on a Saturday afternoon. That'll be the jungle will be hopping. Got to go to College Station for a midweek game on March 6th. And we'll be playing likely a desperate Texas A&M team. Texas A&M team is going the wrong way. They've got 6 quad 1 wins, but their record, I heard Joe Lunardi say this last night, their record does not match their metrics. And then State closes out the regular season at home against South Carolina. Mm-hmm. So SEC opener and the final game of the regular season. Yeah. They lost the opener, what was it, by 2?
No, it was by, I think, like 6.
More than that? It was close late.
Yeah. It was close, yeah. So that goes, if you're keeping score at home, yeah, quad 2, quad 1, quad 1, quad 1, quad 2. Kentucky is interesting, though. They play Alabama this weekend. They're at 24 in the net. They could potentially, because they also finished the season with Tennessee. But by the time that's all said and done, that could end up being a quad 2 game.
It kind of feels like by virtue of that closing schedule that they're going to, they're not going to lose all of them. Feels like they'll stay in that area.
Because between Alabama and Tennessee, they have Vanderbilt and Arkansas. So, they'll get a couple wins.
For Ole Miss, a massive game on Saturday at home against South Carolina.
Got to win it. That simple.
Follow that up with a home game against Alabama. By the way, the Alabama-Florida game last night was spectacular.
Really good game. Yeah. There was good basketball last night.
Yeah. Road trips, back-to-back games at Missouri, at Georgia. And then they close it out at home against Texas A&M on the final Saturday of the regular season.
Whatever the Alabama-Ole Miss over is, take it.
Yeah. I mean, it still feels like that magic number is 10. The bubble is so bad, though. I don't think people talk enough about the bubble being bad. Like, Ole Miss doesn't look good like a tournament team right now. Honestly, the last 4 games, they kind of haven't. Mm-hmm. But look at who else is on the bubble. Look at Texas A&M, for example. What have they looked like lately? So the metrics, though, they hate Ole Miss. The metrics do. They just do for a lot of reasons. Very little margin for error. The way they're playing right now doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence to think that they can get 4 wins. The path is still in front of them, but, I mean, they just simply, they got to play better. And they can. We've seen it. They beat Mississippi State. They won in College Station. They can play better, but until they do, winning 4 of the next 5 doesn't seem likely.
And the path to doing that hasn't changed. Right? I mean, it's you got to beat South Carolina at home, you got to beat Missouri and Georgia on the road, and you got to beat Texas A&M at home. You do that, and you're in the tournament. If you only go 3-2 in those 5 games, and you finish 9-9, there is work to be done in Nashville to get an NCAA tournament bid. Anything worse than that? 2-3 or worse in the final 5 games, not playing in the NCAA tournament without winning the SEC tournament.
It'll be NIT.
Yeah. So that's what's left for Mississippi State. That's what's left for Ole Miss. State's at 7-6 in the league. Their net is still in pretty good shape. Is there a magic number, hey, Dad? Is it 2 more? 9 SEC wins and the Dogs are in?
Oh, and I think at 8 they're probably very much on the bubble, and at 9 they're a lock. They're in.
The only problem with 8 is that means they go 1-4 in the final 5 games of the regular season.
Agreed, and that's not a good look. But they're still, their net would be good.
Yeah. Sports Talk, Miss. Reading directly from the obituary of Robert Bobby Carroll Showles Jr. Bobby was an ordained minister, director of activities in Southern Baptist churches in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Missouri, and on staff at the Missouri Baptist Convention. He was the founder and director of Sports Crusaders Ministry, a basketball referee, and a basketball coach.
Get to it. For
He
God's
received
sakes.
a master's degree and a bachelor's degree from Mississippi State University. He played on 3 SEC championship teams and went to the Game of Change at the NCAA tournament in 1963.
I looked all over the internet trying to find this information and could not find it.
Bobby is also survived by 2 children, Dawgs Shals and wife Corinne.
I made a mistake. My bad. In that case, I'm going to do something that you might not believe. The Ole Miss fans have a point. He shouldn't be officiating Mississippi State games.
I disagree. I disagree with that.
This goes back a few years ago when you had the guy who played football at Alabama officiating an Alabama-Mississippi State game and was involved in a controversial call. I mean, it's just so easy to avoid the hint of impropriety. Why not just do it?
Yeah, but to me, then you're questioning professionalism, and I know it's not exactly the same because I have no ability to impact the outcome of a game. But it's in the same ball. It's cousins to the idea of, well, Richard shouldn't be able to broadcast an Ole Miss game because he went to school there and he grew up in Oxford. Or Richard shouldn't be able to.
What you just said, though, you can't affect the outcome of a game. A referee can.
Yeah.
It's like a judge recusing themselves from a case. That doesn't mean they couldn't do it correctly. It's just better if they didn't try.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I feel.
Well, that being said, that's not why Ole Miss lost last night. It's not. It's simply not.
Never mind that. I've seen Doug Shals come to the hump and just blast State with bad calls. So I'm not too terribly worried about his professionalism. But this is just another thing the SEC does where it could just be like, why not just make it easy on yourselves?
And they do, or they at least did have a policy in football where officials were not allowed to officiate games at a school at which they played a sport. So if I remember correctly, I'm having to go way back here because it's been a long time since he called SEC games, but if I remember correctly, Steve Freeman was not allowed to call Mississippi State games because he played football at Mississippi State. I think Brad Freeman, when he was in the SEC, I think he was on the football team at Mississippi State, so that would have caused him not to be able to call state games either. But if Brad had just gone to Mississippi State but not played football there, he could have called Mississippi State games even though his dad had played the game there. I think that's right. But nevertheless.
Interesting.